Before we dive in, I'd love for you to take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your support helps me to continue to bring these meaningful and hopefully inspiring conversations to help you take action and achieve your dreams. So let's do this. Your perspective matters. In life, your perspective influences everything. Everything you do, everything you say, your actions, your beliefs, but also it influences how you see things, your experiences that you have, what people say, and the meaning you make behind them. Perspective is everything. And that's why I thought it was important that we cover it today. And I've been reading a book recently that has really changed everything, the way I perceive and what I do and what I believe, and actually where those beliefs have come from. So in this episode, we're going to talk about perspective and why you need a third perspective. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode. Last week, actually it was 2 weeks ago now, I released an episode where I was a guest on the awesome podcast Trajectory with the wonderful Sarah Maxwell. And in that episode, we discussed why I left my 17-year career and what drove me to it and how I made the decision ultimately, because it was a really, really hard decision. In that episode, I talk about the podcast and I talk about how I don't like doing solo episodes. I'm very uncomfortable doing them. I don't think I sound very good. I have all these things in my head, right, as to why I shouldn't do solo episodes. They're hard for me, but I do solo episodes because they're hard. And so when I listened back over that, I realized that this season I have not done a solo episode. Aside from the very first episode, which was basically the introduction to season 5. So I thought I'd come back on here and chat one-on-one with you. And when I think about what I want to talk to you about, whilst there is a bazillion things, you know, to be perfectly honest, I kind of, when it gets to pressing record and sitting in this chair with this microphone in front of me, I just go blank. I find it really hard. So bear with me as I sort through these muddled ideas in my brain. But not only that, I wanted to emphasize the fact that if you find something hard, the only way to get better at something is to do more of it. You're going to suck in the beginning. So I'm embracing the suck right now, and I hope you can too. So in this week's episode, I wanted to talk about perspective. I really think that this topic can transform the way you live, the way you connect with others, and also the way you go through challenges and navigate them. And really, when I think about it, I think it has a huge influence on every aspect of your life, because, you know, it influences the way we view our circumstances. It influences the way we see ourselves and those around us. And it is really central to everything we experience minute to minute, day to day, week by week. This episode is actually inspired by the book The Third Perspective by Africa Brook. We're going to explore how shifting perspective can unlock personal growth, deepen our understanding of others, and help us tackle difficult situations with resilience and clarity. So, let's get into it with some practical steps and action points that hopefully you can implement today. And if not, well, I certainly wouldn't recommend implementing all of them because that can be overwhelming, but certainly choose one that feels easiest. Yes, that feels easiest, because that is a thing that you will start and hopefully will stick to. Firstly, I want to talk about personal growth and the power of perspective, because we often talk about personal growth like it's something that you get or that you can achieve. And whilst I believe it is something that you achieve because you do something and you grow from it, and growth happens in any way, growth can come from just about anything: how you see things, how you interpret your journey or your failures or your successes. So, one of the key ideas in the third perspective is that personal growth doesn't just happen with those big aha moments. It's in the day-to-day shifts in how you perceive your challenges. And Africa Brook talks about stepping outside of yourself, seeing yourself not just from your own point of view, but from a third and outside perspective. This is a critical skill for growth. It allows you to detach from the emotional weight of a situation and see what's really going on. There was a study which was published in Psychological Science that found that when participants were able to take a third-person perspective on their experience, they were less likely to feel overwhelmed by negative emotions. This led to better problem solving and increased resilience during stressful times. So the next time you feel frustrated or stuck in your own personal development, pause. Ask yourself, what am I missing from this viewpoint? Imagine that you're someone else. What would they say about your situation? What would they notice about you that you aren't seeing? Practicing this creates distance from your own biases and emotions. So you could use a journal. If you love writing things down, write down your current perspective on a challenge and then write down what it might look like from someone else's eyes. Keep doing this until you can spot blind spots in your own thinking. Understanding others through perspective. This section I wanted to talk about because one of the biggest shifts in perspective is moving from self-focused to other-focused. When we're locked into our own viewpoint, it's hard to truly understand others. Africa Brook emphasizes that to deepen relationships, whether personal or professional, you must seek to understand, not just respond. She calls this radical empathy, and it involves stepping out of your lens and fully inhabiting someone else's experience, even for just a moment. I know this can be hard, especially when you disagree with someone or their views seem completely opposite to ours, but that's where growth happens, not in agreement, but in learning how to coexist and understand different perspectives. And I think that is something that I've really learnt to embrace, especially over what was a 17-year career, seeing different people from all walks of life with different beliefs and different opinions. It allowed me to hear them without judgment, or maybe there was a bit of judgment, but that's my ignorance at the time. But being able to hear different opinions and views and values and belief systems allowed me to expand my worldview, because if I believed something or I saw something in a certain way and someone came in and saw it potentially in the opposite way, it allowed me to, for a moment, understand where they were coming from, understand their viewpoint, understand why they believe what they believe. And that is power. Being able to understand someone helps build respect, even if it's not necessarily a viewpoint that you agree with. Now, I'm not talking real extremes here. I'm talking about things that are meaningful to others and that are meaningful to you, and therefore being able to have that conversation is a powerful way to expand your thoughts, the way you feel about certain things in life, in the world. It's a really important way to connect with others. So the next time you're in conversation, focus purely on understanding the other person's viewpoint. Don't listen to respond, listen to learn. Ask questions like, what makes you feel this way? Or can you help me understand your thinking of this? This practice shifts the dialogue from debate to connection. So when you're engaging with others, especially in challenging conversations, repeat back what you've heard before giving your opinion. This not only makes the other person feel valued and seen and heard, but it helps you ensure that you've truly understood their perspective, that you've truly listened, that you truly understand what they've said. Now, let's get to the harder part, shifting viewpoints in difficult situations. When life throws curveballs, whether it's failure, loss, unforeseen challenges, how we handle difficulty is rooted in how we view it. Africa Brook speaks to the idea that suffering is inevitable, but the way we frame that suffering is what determines whether we grow or crumble. She calls this the growth lens. Through this lens, adversity is not something to be avoided, but embraced as part of the learning process. In challenging times, our natural tendency is to focus on what's wrong. But what if, instead, we shifted to ask, what can I learn here? That changing question alone opens up new pathways for resilience and growth. And I know that can sound really hard and really cliched. And in the moment, you kind of don't want to be learning or looking for the growth, looking for the lesson. In the moment, you can be caught up in those emotions. And I've certainly been there. And if someone said to me whilst I was in that emotion, what can you learn from this? I would probably say not so nice words, get you know what, and give me some time. So give yourself the time and space to be in those emotions. When you're in those emotions, they're heavy, they're raw, they're real, and it's very, very hard to be rational, seek clarity. So be in those emotions, but give yourself the expiry date, whether it's 24 hours, whether it's 2 days, depending on what it is, you know what is best for you. But be in that moment, feel those feelings, move through them. But when you're out of them, then search for the lesson. Because when you're in those feelings, you can't process what happened with the clarity that you'll have when those emotions have passed. So when you're past the emotion, or at least they're no longer as intense or raw, ask yourself, how can I grow from this? What is this experience teaching me that I wouldn't learn otherwise? I think that's really important because you don't get the same lesson from every experience. And the really hard ones will teach you something that you can't from anything else. And to add to that, you could come up with a mantra. And obviously this mantra that you come up with is going to be different for different types of situations. But one of the mantras that I like thinking about or using in situations, certainly in the gym, because that's where I like to push myself, is this is hard and this is what you want. You want this right now, because afterwards you're going to be so much better. So that's the type of mantra that I like to tell myself, is that this is actually what I want. It doesn't feel like it, but I want this because I'm going to be better after this. So you can come up with different mantras for different situations to get you through those harder, tough moments. Now let's talk about some mindset traps that can keep us stuck in our perspectives, even when we want to shift out of them. So the first one is confirmation bias. This is when we only seek out information that confirms what we already believe. It's like living in an echo chamber, hearing our own thoughts repeated back to us without challenge. If you find that this is you. You've noticed that everyone that you talk to has the same viewpoint. Then try and get out of that environment somehow. Seek out opposing viewpoints and engage with them genuinely. It's not about agreeing, but it's about seeing things from different angles. Another trap that we can get into is the single story. This is the tendency to believe that one narrative is the full truth about a person or a situation. When we rely on a single story, we limit our understanding and miss out on the complexity of life. So ask yourself, what other stories exist here? And it's so common, whether it's on social media or if it's through gossip or whatever it is, there's always been a story, right? But have you ever gone to yourself, there's two sides to a story? If you've ever told yourself that or said that to yourself or to someone, you're on the right track, because there's always another side. And in fact, there might be more than another side. So be mindful in what you hear and doing the deep dive, doing the research, looking into the facts. Next is the all or nothing thinking or approach. And that is, I'm sure we've all done it, that where we see things in black or white, success or failure, good or bad. I mean, how often have you caught yourself saying, this is a bad situation, or I'm successful because I did this, or I've failed because I didn't achieve this or that. And life is rarely that simple. Practicing a more nuanced perspective helps us see the grey areas, and it recognizes that growth often happens in the in-between moments. That is something that I'm constantly trying to be aware of, where I'm using that language as well, where I'm catching myself saying, that was bad, or I failed, or that was successful, and why I'm using those words and what my thinking is around those moments and why I think they've been successful or why I failed. I think when you can step back and ask yourself these questions, you get a better insight into yourself and into your beliefs and potentially where they came from. So after all of that, how do we even put the third perspective in practice? Well, one of the biggest takeaways from the third perspective is that perspective isn't this static thing. It's constantly evolving. It's shaped by our experiences and how we choose to interpret them. So don't think you can do this for once or for a week or for the next 6 months and then you're good to go for the rest of your life. Not quite. It is, like we've said, ever evolving, because you evolve and you will have experiences that you haven't had yet. Africa Brook talks about perspective agility, the ability to shift your viewpoint fluidly depending on the situation. This is a skill you can cultivate by practicing awareness, challenging your assumptions, and being open to new interpretations. You can begin to see life through a multi-dimensional lens. So where do you start? Start by becoming aware of the narratives you tell yourself about situations. Like, are you hearing yourself saying, this is unfair, or I'm not good enough? That's something I say. Or why me? These are fixed perspectives. Now, challenge them. What's another way of seeing this? Or how would I view this if I wasn't emotionally attached to the outcome? Over time, this practice strengthens your ability to see things from multiple angles. So, engage with diverse viewpoints, read books, listen to podcasts, or have conversations with people who challenge your worldview. Exposure to different perspectives broadens your mental framework and helps you see situations from a richer, more informed place. Perspective isn't just about changing your mind. It's about changing your world. When we expand our perspective, we open ourselves up to new possibilities, deeper connections, and greater resilience. Remember, your viewpoint shapes your reality. By practicing perspective agility, understanding others more deeply, and shifting how you approach challenges, you create the space for continuous growth. I hope this episode has given you some new tools to approach life differently. If you found this episode helpful or enlightening, I would love for you to rate this episode, review it, and share it with your friends. All of this helps me to continue to do this work, and I love chatting with you. I love being able to bring different guests and thought perspectives and knowledge to you. So I appreciate you. Stay awesome, and I'll catch you in the next one.